Roll call, please.
Kate Thomas,
Here.
Gabe Doney,
Here.
Jim Hansen, Amy Plisky, Clay Colomb. Oh, he's absent with notice. My apologies. Deb Baker and Brianna Funky.
Here. Please stand and say the pledge with us. All right, first of all, take a, if you're having trouble with YouTube, I guess it's not working for some people, click out of it and then click back into our agenda, and then a new link should be there, just in case anybody else is having trouble with that link. All right, number 3, I need a motion and second to approve of the agenda.
Second.
All right, second by Clay, and discussion, go ahead.
Shirley, how many more blue sheets we have? So that's a total of 14? 15? Madam President, I make a motion that we do all 15 speakers 3 minutes apiece. That extends it to 45 minutes.
Okay, he needs a second. Deb seconded, Shirley.
It's 14.
Okay, all those in favor to extend the time and do 3 minutes each. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes. All right, we are back to the motion and second to approve of the agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, passes. All right, we're on to sharing the success. Kumar Velswamy is out not feeling well, so we will do Jackie Talley. Dr. Simon?
Thank you, President Thomas. It's truly my pleasure to introduce our new Director of Federal Programs, Jackie Talley. Jackie's been a long-time principal in our school district prior to moving to this position, and she brings just a wealth of principal experience and Title I experience to this new role. So with that, I would invite Jackie to share a few words of introduction.
Thank you very much. I just want to take, on behalf of Kumar and I, this opportunity to thank Dr. Simon as well as the Board of Education for this opportunity. Thank you.
All right, moving on to persons wishing to comment. Just really quickly, the guidelines again. Issues that affect individuals or particular schools should be addressed at the school building level. Speakers should focus their main points and not be repetitive, please. Personal matters and complaints that directly and indirectly identify employees shall not be discussed. To maintain a civil dialogue, threats and intimidation are not allowed. And we have our first speaker, Florence Thompson, 3 minutes.
Good evening, Board. My name is Florence Thompson. I'm president of South Dakota Parents Involved in Education. I'm also a retired school psychologist with over 40 years experience in the schools as a psychologist. I'd like to speak a little bit about an article that I saw, and I will send this article to the board. It's 1,000 lawyers and 10,000 doctors file a lawsuit for violations of the Nuremberg Code against the CDC, the World Health Organization, the WHO, WHO, and the Davos Group for crimes against humanity. And they list a number of the sections of the Nuremberg Code and explain why these are in violation. And the one that caught my eye was number 1, voluntary consent. No person should be forced to take a medical experiment without informed consent. And what we are seeing now, they are alleging that this is still an experimental vaccine. It was never, ever officially approved, and it's never gone through the proper trials. And so it is experimental, and it is being forced on people. And we are seeing young people who are now dying from blood clots and heart attacks, things that don't generally affect young people, but they've had the vaccine. So since these are potentially life and death decisions, only the parents have that right and responsibility. And I know it's difficult to make those decisions because none of us know what the outcome of all this is going to be. But no one should be coerced in that choice. And I think there was an article in the Rapid City Journal that explained why the Rapid City School Board is leaving these choices to the parents. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. So thank you very much, Board, for standing up for the parents and the children's rights.
Thanks, Florence. Sonia Dick, next speaker.
Hello, Dr. Simon, neighbors, and board members. My name is Sonia Dick. I'm an alum of Meadowbrook Elementary, Southwest Middle School, and Stevens High School, and I am now fortunate to be a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering. I've read through your agenda, and as you're preparing to make decisions about this school year and policies that govern years ahead, such as item 8A, I think it is prudent to outline the reality our community is in. According to data given on the RCAS dashboard, there have been 293 confirmed COVID-19 cases within the district since Friday, September 10th. Within the same period, there were a total of 1,228 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Pennington County. Thus, 24% of cases in Pennington County were directly from the school district. However, the school district only makes up 14% of the county population. The district averaged 2 cases per 100 people each day, whereas the county averaged 1 case per 100 people per each day. So not only do schools have about 2 times higher the number of cases per capita, but it's important to note that these are just directly student and staff cases that have been reported. The 24% of Pennington County cases that are directly due to the district do not include transmission from a staff member to their spouse or from a student to their family. Thus, the schools are clearly linked to a high transmission of COVID-19 in our community. More so, school environment is by far the highest transmissibility environment that students are exposed to. If it was true that students weren't getting COVID at all in schools, the daily cases would be reflecting last year's numbers or even better since some students are vaccinated. But they aren't. They are much higher than at this point last year. Lastly, I want to touch on the hindrances to student learning due to some of the current protocols that are in our district for a pandemic. Teacher and substitute resources are scarce, and I understand that many industries are dealing with unemployment issues right now. However, teachers and substitutes are especially prone to leave their current job due to the lack of safety precaution and support from people like you, our board, and our community. Thus, librarians are subbing classes. This is with no disrespect to any of our amazing librarians, but I feel very few of them would be qualified to teach AP Calculus one day and freshman English the next. When this happens, students do not experience the back to normal learning environment that you desire. I've received reports that teachers are not being allowed to take professional leave, even if they can line up a substitute, as teacher and substitute resources are scarce. Once again, hindering professional opportunities hurts students in the long run. Lastly, I know teachers have dumbed down their classes to avoid close contact scenarios. Students are not getting hands-on labs that I got when I was in the same school. You may say this is just the nature of a pandemic, but the CDC states that the close contact definition excludes students who are within 3 feet from an infectious person if both people are wearing masks, so they could be having a better learning situation. I hope you continue to think about what these hindrances mean.
That's 3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. Next speaker, Ashley Whitehead.
Good evening. I am a parent of 2 children in the public school system, and I'm also a first grade teacher in our district. I wanted to start with an excerpt from your governance process, which reads, board members will create and maintain the linkage between the community and the district administration to represent the informed voice of the community. This linkage will include seeking input regarding community values on issues of results and ethics, and educating the community on issues impacting the district. I'm having a really hard time understanding why you quickly denied 3 community members that were also ER doctors an opportunity to educate the community on issues that are clearly impacting our school district. It seems like you may be putting your own political agenda before our students, and I really hope that that's not true. I am grateful you agreed to have one speak, because I had no idea our hospitals were that bad. I believe it is important to inform others about these issues so that we can make decisions on how to protect our families. I would like to hear more dialogue among you so that I myself, as well as others, can understand why you vote the way you do on some of these issues. As you are aware, we have a shortage in staff in our school district. I implore you to please visit these schools and speak to teachers and principals and staff so that you can get a better understanding of what happens when so many are sick. I will share some of the experiences at my school, but please know every school is different, and this is why it is important to reach out to them. When there are no subs as teachers are sick, our reading interventionists and guiding counselors are pulled to take over the classes for the day. What this means is that those students who require intensive small group instruction and reading are not receiving help that day. Those students who require time with the counselor do not get to receive the guidance that they need. When we are short in custodial staff, our schools do not receive the usual deep clean. We are also short on nursing staff. When this happens, our secretaries also take on the duty of helping sick or injured students. Plus, there's no COVID testing done in our schools when nurses are out, which means parents have to test elsewhere or not at all, and this puts others at risk for infection. Please reach out and listen to the people who are in our schools. Get advice from leaders in our community. I'm not sure if a mask mandate is the answer, but what I do know is something has to be done. Please acknowledge that our schools are suffering because right now nothing is being done on their behalf. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, Tanchi Weaver.
Good evening, board. I'm going to break a little bit from the all COVID all the time theme, and I'm going to talk about something else on your agenda. It is items 8B and 8C. Last meeting, you were roundly criticized for ending the student representative program. Now, the people that scolded you for that didn't take the time to look into what was actually happening with that program. It is being relocated to a more appropriate place. It does not belong in the board elections section of your policy. Also, I do believe that most states, and even in South Dakota, most school districts don't have student representatives. So it wouldn't, if you wanted to end the program, it wouldn't be anything outside of the ordinary. In fact, it's really unusual to have such representatives on, in a program on the board. So as you consider what to do with it moving forward, I would suggest that up till now, this has been a program that has benefited students. One of the parents of a previous student representative said as much at the last meeting, that it has been a nice resume enhancement for certain well-connected children. And that is not what programs in schools should be about. What a student representative of any school, any entity, any body should be a fairly representative person of the entire body. It should be someone that has to compete for a position. The position should be meaningful. It should mainly be for students who have an interest in civics, who have shown sort of a tendency to take history classes, to study history classes, to be involved in their community, maybe their church, that are looking to participate as a representative of the people that they also attend school with. To me, that would be a program worth keeping. And so as you move forward with this, I hope you take those things into consideration. I think it's important for kids to understand how their government works, and just seating people on the board and letting them read the activities report is not educational. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Forrest Cooper.
Hello, Board, and I'd like to address President Thomas. I read your editorial the other day in the paper, and I was struck by how clear and cogent and diplomatic your words were. I didn't at first understand why you had written this, but it became clear that it was in response to another editorial written by another board member on September 10th. So I went back and read that September 10th editorial and was confused.
He's not attacking. He can continue speaking.
Pardon me? Go
ahead. Sorry.
I was confused by that editorial as to what the point was. It talked about politics and power in this board environment. I didn't see anything about education in it. And to me, it seems like we should all keep in mind that the past election is over, it's done. It's time for this board to focus on educational matters. There was some hint in that September 10th editorial that there was abuse of power, and it even described power in general as being greedy. So the previous board had years of being in power, and now there's a different board with a different approach. So why was this idea of greedy abuse of power even brought up? So I appreciate in your editorial, President Thomas, that you dealt with clarifying your position on this. And then at the end, you focused on education, which I thought was extremely pertinent in this whole matter, that all of the politics that have gone on and are still going on are not pertinent to dealing with our education in Rapid City. I've met several members of this board, and I am convinced of their high quality as people and their dedication to provide the best educational opportunity and achievement for the children in our city.
3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Next speaker, Kristen Cuno or Cuno? Cuno?
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My physician, who I go to regularly, and she has a husband who is an ER doctor in our community. I mentioned I heard you speak at the school board meeting, and she says, I just can't believe it. We have a young child, an elementary child, and she dojoed her class teacher to ask that if the child's mask should come down or not be properly on, that the teacher would help their child out to help keep their family safe so that they can serve our community. And the teacher response was that, no, they're not supposed to assist with the masks. And so I still don't understand that. It's like a child wearing glasses. We would assist if the child's glasses were not on. We would help them. The parent has specifically asked for help. We need families to be safe. So here they are, they're trying their best to follow the CDC guidelines so they can continue to care for Rapid City citizens, including all of us, especially in that overworked ICU that is full. When I reflect back to one of the reasons of the bond issue that unfortunately failed, one of the things that was in a proponent for a bond issue being passed was we need to attract medical professional people to our community. And so when I look at what's happening right now, they take time out of their days. They are speaking to the board. They are writing papers in the journal. And I think, I'm not speaking for them, but it seems like they are not being heard. And so I wonder going forward, if we want to attract these much needed resources in our community, and we do not want to do anything to protect them when their child comes home from the school day, as they have listened to all the science, to the CDC, I just wonder, how are we going to move forward and build and grow as a community? Also, when I was at my appointment, she asked me, do you know why the dashboard is not updated? She said, I thought they voted that it would be specified by schools, and then she showed me. And so this is right before the school board
3 minutes,
meeting.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Mitzel?
Good evening, board. My name is Kirsten Mitzel, and I wanted to talk to you about the South Dakota Beef Industry Council grant for Stevens and Central High School football programs. I think it's fantastic that we're looking to utilize South Dakota beef as well as promote a healthy lifestyle for our student athletes. One thing I did notice is that Sanford is the contact for all of the nutrition and sports medicine references. And I was hoping to see that there might be a local option for this as well, for local sports medicine as well as nutritionists to weigh in rather than going all the way across the state. Another thing, I wish it was done by the beginning of the football season for the pregame meals. Apparently Spearfish does this back in July, which makes sense that it hasn't been approached yet because the old board had not visited it. And as you guys came in, you met quite the plethora of issues. So I appreciate that you guys are going back and making sure to address this as well to provide for our student athletes. I'm glad that you have the students' best interests at heart and are looking to provide nutrition guidance, and I hope that we can maybe broaden this as well for all students in our schools in the district. I think nutrition is very important when we're talking about immunity and healthy children. I think focusing on good and healthy meals and teaching them how to eat healthy and have healthy lifestyles outside of school would be a great idea as well. So I appreciate you guys looking into this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I did miss Haywood Robinson. It stuck to the other paper, so you're next. I'm going to put it right.
Thanks. I hope the day finds you well. I managed to find my way here, though I'm sure that changing locations has made it difficult for many members of the community to comment. I would like to suggest that, if I might, that you make a comment section available on Zoom or YouTube prior to the meeting so that you can respond or at least read the public opinion before voting. That was frustrating at the last meeting. I sent an email out to each of you and have yet to hear back. I'm not sure if you're just pushing it back to my district rep. I see Clay's not here, so that's not a good omen. This district has a plan from an outside company, Vantage Point, on the bond issue. and it still has plans and logistics necessary to bring us up to a dignified and workable status. I'm talking about our facilities. If you think that Rapid City can't afford to pay for that plan or teachers' raises, then it's probably your duty to come up with an alternative or a feasible plan. It is your duty to find any money offered to us, such as the ELL grant or the ESSER funds. I don't know about you, but at the last meeting, I would crawl through a desert of broken glass to hear for the government fart through a walkie-talkie if they gave me $56 million. That's $56 million. And at the last meeting, to hear people say, I think that we've got all our bases covered. I'm pretty sure it's there. I believe. That's not enough. I don't know what you think $56 million comes from, but that's an enormous sum. Anyway, did you know how many construction wages that is? How many materials purchased? How much economic velocity that offers this town? It's tremendous, and it all comes to us that we didn't generate it. Anyway, and while I'm on lost money to the town, I'm tired of hearing you smugly describe how students are being pulled out of the district. We receive about $10K from every student in the year, and that's $1 million for every 100, and for several hundred over the last few years, that's several $1 million lost. 40% of that is federal funds that come to us. That's no longer in circulation in the Rapid City budget because of that. Also, I don't know about you, but my property taxes didn't go down, and so that means that's also funding that is out of Rapid City circulation. So I want you to represent me in a way that I can spend my money on this town and on myself so that we can understand why when all this comes together, I understand why my W-2s are shrinking instead of growing. Anyway, if you can't secure income, you can't secure staff or facilities. If you can't secure staff or facilities, you can't provide educational services. And if you can't provide educational services, you won't have children in the community. And that means no grandkids to watch, no kids to care for us, and no professionals coming to provide vital services. I'm afraid I'm watching you dig this town's grave. So please, please prove me wrong.
Next speaker is Connie. And would you please tell me how to say your last name once again? Fanenga?
Fanenga.
Okay.
Yes. I'm Connie Fanenga. Thank you very much. Coy, it's wonderful to see your face. Brianna, it's wonderful to see your face. Jim, you also. Kate, Gabe, and Deb, and then Mrs. Talley over there. Hello, Mrs. Talley. Congratulations to your new position of federal programs. So I'd like to say a moment about that. Mrs. Talley, with the federal programs, congratulations, but there's always strings attached. And please make us aware of those strings that are attached prior to taking those government grants and the programs. I think that's important because we need to keep this as an education and not medical martial law. There is a medical facility on every block of this town. We've got that covered. So let's keep this about education. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla? Johnsonbach. Beautiful. Thank you.
Let's see. Thank you so much, Board. I sincerely want to thank all of you who serve in public office, especially in these challenges times we currently face. It seems to me that you're required to be mediators between two sides with no shared understanding of what education is or is not, and no common ground on anything else as near as I can see. So under these circumstances, I want to encourage you to support parent choice and freedom. There is not now, nor has there ever been, a one-size-fits-all approach to education. My son just finished high school last year. I'm 60, so I was a little slow. And we've lived in several states. My children attended several types of schools. There were Christian schools, parochial schools, charter schools, private schools. My husband's sister formed a foreign language immersion schools. I just wanted to touch a little bit on charter schools because I know we don't have that here, but they come for a lot of different reasons, and some of them is because of school overcrowding. Charter schools have their own buildings. They're not funded by the taxpayer money. So there are a whole lot of options out there for parent choice, as well as just thinking creatively outside the box because of the times we're in. Each decision I made about where I sent my kids was based upon their individual strengths and challenges, as well as the school environments that were available to them where I lived. It's not the same all over. Nothing was perfect, and sometimes decisions were difficult. And parents, choice is what allows you to best meet your child's needs. Whether you are on mask or unmask or all the other things that are out there in curriculum, choice is your gift. Be brave, be creative, be resourceful. You're a better educator than you think, and your children are more resilient than you know. This is based on experience, certainly myself, and having raised kids. And I know every single one is unique. So be flexible, look out there at the choices, because I'm going to tell you, staffing is going to be an issue. There aren't going to be enough staff. You're going to have to make some other decisions. It is where we are at today. So, you know, we can try to beat people into submission, or we can actually go out there and do the things we know we need to do for our kids and our community. So I just want to encourage you to do that. You can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Delzer?
Thank you. My name is Emily Delzer, and I am an elementary teacher and a parent to 3 middle and high school students in the district. I'm here tonight in hopes of shifting the conversation to learning loss and student safety. I understand that the majority of this board promised for school to return to normal for staff and students in order to raise the district's academic scores. What's happening in our schools right now is far from normal in many more ways than 3 minutes will allow me to cover. I also understand that the majority of this board believes it's giving the responsibility to the parents of students, as well as the employees, to know the assumption of risk when it comes to wearing masks. But are parents aware that they need to know the assumption of risk as it pertains to their child's academic achievement and personal safety at school? First of all, we have a multitude of teachers out every day in almost every building, and we don't have enough subs to cover these positions. This means that support staff is being pulled when possible. I would be one of those librarians covering classes. And when it's not possible, kids are split between teachers. In shifting the conversation to learning loss and student safety, let's talk about the kids. The kids that are in school are having to endure even larger class sizes with teachers who may not be their own, or they're getting a new teacher sometimes daily. With many unfilled para and SPED positions paired with contracted teachers and paras being out, SPED students are not getting their hours met. This is a major legal issue affecting our students every single day. All are examples of learning loss happening right now. We have a serious inability of teaching personnel reporting for duty, which is resulting in inadequate supervision of students, to quote the wording of District Code EBCE. Secondly, this year, many, if not all, elementary schools lost their behavior strategist positions. When classroom teachers have to take on the role of the behavior strategist, it no doubt takes time away from instruction, thus creating learning loss, not to mention a possible unsafe environment. One of the many high-needs students that I work with is autistic and has made incredible improvements in regards to behavior since last year. This young student, who melted down on a weekly basis last year, had not done so all year until yesterday. This student had nearly 10 extra kids in her classroom and an absent teacher in the last week. Her teacher, who's worked so hard for weeks to build a relationship with her and make her feel comfortable and safe in the classroom, was gone and will be for the next 10 days. So this student, who's unable to self-regulate and does not have a behavior strategist to meet with, completely lost it yesterday in the middle of class. And she's one of many. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, we need a plan. We need a plan for the kids. We need a plan to address learning loss instead of watching it continue. This district is full of very intelligent, very passionate, and very experienced staff. Why not ask those of us who are enduring what you refer to as back to normal what might actually help us get back to normal sooner than later? We need a plan, because not having one is not working.
3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
Haley
you.
Fredit? She may be in the other room. We'll have to go around. Yep, thanks.
Hello, last name is Freed, as I said last time, freed from this place. Unlike so many here claim to be, I'm not a professional nor an expert in the medical field or the field of law. That being said, I do think I'm well versed enough to look at the facts in front of me and make a conclusion. It's a fact that too many teachers and students are out right now. It's a fact that the vaccine is not microchipped and poisonous. I promise that no one here will be put into the mainframe. It's a fact that masks aren't 100% effective, but it's also a fact that they aren't 0% effective. Wouldn't it be smart to take proper precautions so that our students and staff could have a normal school year? It's also a fact that transparency was one of the key points that over half the board ran on. Where is the transparency? I have a lot of questions, but I know none will be answered by the bulk of you. I want to know why you won't listen to professionals and why you think xenophobia has any place on this board or in this community. I want to know why the majority of the public isn't being listened to. Someone being louder doesn't mean they are smarter. I want to know why over half the board doesn't have kids in the Rapid City Area School District and what their motives are to be on this board. I think I know the answer, but I'd love it to be confirmed. I want to know where you think you're going to find $56 million. I'm just at a loss. You won't listen to professionals and people who know more than you, and you won't do anything to ensure a normal school year. Believe it or not, students and staff falling ill left and right is not normal. Before I go, and I'll follow this up with an email because I'd love to know the answer. How many people died of mask mouth last year? I know that was a huge concern for some of you, and I haven't seen a single death. It just seems odd that such information was proven wrong, and it's just very disappointing to see that there's no concern for any legitimate problems that are going on. We need a plan, and I don't see it happening, and I know I speak for more than myself when I say that it needs to happen, and quick.
Thank you. Michael Burke, I can't read the last part of it.
Berkland.
Berkland.
Hello, I'm Michael Berkland. I taught at Central High School math for the last 6 years. President Thomas wrote an editorial for the Journal that truly helped me to understand the perspectives of much of the board, so I am grateful for that. Let's start with one thing that we do agree on. You all did fairly win an election. However, I think we have a disagreement on what that means. I do not believe that it is your duty to only represent the less than 3,500 people who voted for you in June. Rather, as a school board, you are to listen to and to represent all 14,000 students, all 1,800 staff, and all members of this community in a dynamic manner. Not only do I believe that you are not representing the community, you are not even representing those that you are here to work for, those in the schools. At the last meeting and at the meeting tonight, not only have healthcare workers showed up in huge numbers, but so did the staff of Rapid City Area Schools. The staff who are asking you to keep them and their students safe and healthy. The staff who are telling you that what you are doing is not equipping them to teach our students. The staff who are asking you for your support. The staff who are asking you to respect them and empower them to do their jobs instead of fueling the fire of distrust in education. You have taken away from teachers the very freedoms you claim to stand for. Teachers this year are more scared than they have ever been, and not just of COVID. I ask again, as I did last meeting, what are you going to do once you have driven all staff away from this district? Or alternatively and preferably, how can you change your messaging and decisions so that staff want to stay? On another note, regarding things that have been overshadowed by masks, I encourage you to reconsider your position on grants such as the English Language Learner Grant and the ESSER grants. Our district is strapped for funds. One of the reasons I and many other teachers resigned is because I was making $5,000 less each year than I was promised because of a lack of funds. In turning down the grant, argument was made that there were funds elsewhere. I think hundreds of teachers would like to know where those funds are coming from. Besides the money issue, we are obligated to provide every student a free and appropriate public education, even if it's just 20 to 25 of them. Lastly, I just want to say that we are indeed here for education, but when a health issue starts to keep our teachers and students from being in schools, then health issues are education issues, and it does become your duty to act. Talk to a staff member. What you are doing is not working, COVID or otherwise. To summarize, I agree that you are keeping your promises, but only to those who voted for you. You are not keeping your promises to those you vowed to serve. You cannot call for unity while making decisions that hurt so many. I encourage you to reconsider your decisions and remember who you are on this board to represent. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, Raquel Akerson. Help me out with that name. It's kind of smeared together if it's wrong.
So my name is Raquel Akerson. Hello again. As we previously established, you can call me Rocky for convenience sake. We need easy, remember? I'm a special education teacher in this district. and I'm spending my valuable time speaking to you rather than lesson planning or spending time with my family. Because my staff and students deserve an advocate. At the last meeting, this board collectively chose to alter the format in which public statements are heard, limiting the voice of the public greatly, considering there were 70 requests to address the board. Even if you let that many speak, even if you did not know who the first 10 speakers would be, which I highly doubt, choosing to let that many speak is a clear message to this community and your employees that you do not want to hear their input. At the very least, 30 people should have gotten 1 minute each, as many were prepared to do, allowing you to hear close to half of the public voice. You chose not to listen. It was a conscious decision. You had made your mind up before you came in. And while I realize the board made a decision about COVID protocols last meeting, I have been made aware through conversations with those I disagree with in this community that the public is largely uninformed about the details of the back to school plan. Since this board was voted in based on their promise of transparency, I feel it's necessary to let the community know what your vote means. And the young lady that spoke earlier about the mask not being replaced on the child's face is exactly right. I am not allowed to encourage hygiene measures like hand washing with students. I teach life skills. What else would you consider a life skill? I am not allowed to recommend that students wear a mask, even if they are clearly sick or are unable or unwilling to cover their mouth and nose. I am not allowed to suggest that students physically distance themselves when possible to prevent the spread of all sorts of illnesses, not just COVID. I, as a teacher in the thick of it, am not allowed to suggest mitigation techniques to students, knowing full well that they likely won't listen. But I'm not allowed to suggest it because you took that away.
3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. I would just take a moment to have the admin get back with this lady about mitigation all the rules that you can and can't do. And then please follow up with an email towards us. Moving on to board information items. A and B will run together. There's an assessment overview by Dr. Simon, and then she'll continue on with her superintendent report.
Good evening. In advance of our state assessment results coming out, as well as several presentations on our fall assessment data, I thought I'd come here tonight to give you a high-level overview of all of our assessments that you'll be seeing results from this year. And don't worry, there won't be a test at the end tonight. And as a matter of fact, we will loop back to all of this information as we proceed through the school year. So I just wanted to take a moment for you to take a look at this quote, because I think it's really making a fine point, and that is the importance of using assessment to improve education versus criticizing it. So, as we begin tonight, I want to talk to you about two kinds of assessments that are very common in schools. The first are referred to as alternative or classroom assessments, and there's a number of key pieces. First of all, they tend to be designed by teachers themselves, and they're really designed with the purpose of helping teachers to understand if students are learning the content. They are sometimes also called authentic, comprehensive, or performance assessments. And these alternative or classroom assessments can take many forms, and I'm sure all the teachers here with us tonight have used a range, if not all, of these different kinds of assessments. The other kind of assessment are standardized assessments, and these typically are pre-developed by companies or organizations, and they're required by either states or school districts. They're standardized in that every student at a particular grade level is required to take the same test, and then everything about the test is standardized. The time of day that you take them, the questions themselves, the length of time students have to take the tests, directions as the teachers give them, the time of year, and the list goes on. And there are some key purposes to standardized assessments. First of all, it informs how students are achieving and/or how they're growing. Some standardized tests only talk to you and inform you about achievement, some only about growth or progress, and some actually accomplish both. Some assessments provide teachers with diagnostic information to better instruct and support their students in their learning. And what those student assessments tell teachers are the strengths of those individual students, their needs, and what and how a student needs to be taught so that a teacher really can support and intervene with their learning. And finally, assessments inform school districts and communities how students' achievement and/or growth compares across student populations. So as we've looked to what we've had access to these last few years, up until just a couple of years ago, really the only standardized assessment data that we had as a school district was our state assessment, the Smarter Balanced or SBAC assessment data. I think the other thing to note is that that particular assessment only tells you about achievement. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit, versus growth, which really tells a district, a parent, a teacher, how students actually are progressing over the course of a year. And so as we think about the access to data that we have had the last few years, we've really been kept in the dark. So I want to begin now by just doing a quick assessment 101. And again, as we bring these separate data reports to the board, we will overview this information again. So it'll be coming to you again. So let's begin with the state assessment, which is the Smarter Balanced. That assessment measures the grade level proficiency of students in a particular school year compared to similar students statewide. It is an achievement score. So in other words, here in South Dakota, we see how our third grade compares to other third grade. We see how all students compare. We see how special education students compare, etc. It is an autopsy report. And by that in education, we mean a student goes about the school year learning for most of the school year, and then towards the end of the school year, we have this state assessment. And by the time we get that data, it's too late. The school year is over, and so the teacher really can't do anything to help support or intervene with that student. It also does not tell us how much a student grew over the course of that year. Why? because we don't know where the student started. They could have started at grade level and ended at grade level. They could have started at grade level and ended below or above grade level. They could have started well below grade level and made enough progress so that they actually were at grade level or not. We don't know. The test isn't designed to tell us that. It also is not designed to be a measure of improvement or progress during the school year. So next I'm going to talk about one of our new assessments, which is Nwea Map, which stands for Measures of Academic Progress. This particular assessment actually measures how well a student has learned skills in a subject compared to similar students nationally. So districts across the country use this assessment, so it's a nationally normed assessment. And so that piece of information in this assessment tells us achievement. But it also measures how much students grow during the school year and over time. Most importantly, it provides key diagnostic information for teachers to guide their instruction with that student. And it is a measure of improvement or progress. The next assessment I'm going to talk about briefly is the Acadience Assessment. We have had the reading assessment for a couple of years now. We are adding math in K through 2. This assessment does target achievement in that it identifies students who are meeting benchmark and who are not meeting benchmark and who are at risk in reading and math. It also provides teachers with important diagnostic data to help guide their instruction. It also serves as a growth tool in that it monitors student progress for at-risk students while they receive that targeted instruction and intervention. It provides information on effectiveness for a school district system of instructional support. So in other words, longitudinally, if we begin to see that we are not seeing the results that we want to see for all kids, that tells us that we have a core curriculum issue that we need to address. And finally, it also provides us a summative growth report. The final assessment I'm going to talk about tonight is the pre-ACT and ACT assessment that we'll be using in high school. And really the purpose of these assessments are to measure students' college readiness skills as they do progress through high school. So looking at the pre-ACT, that assessment is designed to help predict a student's score on the ACT if they take the ACT as an 11th grader. And it really is a tool for educators, for parents, for students to help identify the strengths and areas for growth for that student so that we can do some goal setting with that student. And it measures their growth over time as 9th and 10th graders. And then moving to the ACT, which first is given in 11th grade and then beyond if students choose to, it's designed to measure what students should know before entering college. And it measures students' college readiness skills as they progress through high school, which is an achievement score. So I'd like you to think about just a couple of scenarios that I posed for you. And the first one is, which school district is showing more progress? So let's look at District A. Its overall district SBAC proficiency rate in reading is 59%. Its overall district MAP percentage in reading of students growing a year or more from that fall assessment to the last assessment in spring is 45%. Now let's look at District B. Its overall state assessment proficiency rate in reading is 51%. However, its overall district MAP percentage of students growing a year or more from fall to spring is 65%. So I would argue that District B actually, despite the fact that its proficiency rate is lower than District A, actually is a district that's progressing quite a great deal more. And MAP is really important information for districts, especially like ours, with our high poverty rate, because we have so many students that come to our system or even start school so developmentally, academically behind where you would expect a typical developing student to be. And so with MAP, we'll be able to see what kind of growth we're seeing from the individual student level all the way to the systems level. Next scenario, which student is growing more and showing more progress? So we're talking about a 4th grade student who began 4th grade reading at grade level. And that student scored a 3, which is proficient, on the state assessment test at the end of 4th grade. And we know from that student's MAP data that they made 1 year's progress in that 1 year of time. Now let's look at student B. This student began the 4th grade year reading 2 years below grade level. This student actually scored a 2, which means developing, on that state assessment. However, in looking at this student MAP data, we see that they actually made 1.5 years worth of progress during the 4th grade year as measured on their MAP assessment. So which student now is actually showing more progress? As I begin to close out, I just want to share with you a brief overview of how teachers use this important assessment data in their classrooms. So when we think about Tier 1, that's our core instruction. That's what all kids receive in reading, in math, in writing, etc. However, this assessment data will tell teachers how effective that core instruction is for their classroom of students. In addition, when they get that assessment data back, the MAP data in particular and the Acadience data, then they can use that information that breaks things down actually to specific skills to help put interventions in place for those students at that Tier 2 level. And so that means students that are not at grade level will get specific interventions to help intervene. Students that are at or already above grade level will get supports to continue to accelerate their learning. And then finally at Tier 3, that's really our most intensive level of intervention. Usually these are students that are really significantly behind grade level, and so we're really looking at what do we need to do on a more intensive basis to intervene with that student. And all of this work, of course, is with the goal of seeing our students successful and ready to graduate from high school to be successful adults. So with that brief overview, I will stand for questions. And I also have our Teaching and Learning Director, Valerie Seals. She's not able to be here in person, but she is on the phone.
All right. Do any board members have any questions? You can either hit that red button for a hand up or raise your hand. All right, go ahead, Jim.
Dr. Simon, I would like to see more about the map and all the information with it. Can you send it to us, or?
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds interesting.
We will be happy to send you more information. In fact, all of our elementary and I believe all of our middle schools are doing parent nights to help parents understand MAP and some of the other assessments too. So we can also forward you a couple of examples of those.
Thank you.
Amy.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. I am looking forward to this data. We've been talking about the need for data since I came on the board and since you were hired as a superintendent, and I'm happy that we have arrived at a spot. Maybe that's a glimmer of light with COVID, because we've had extra funding to be able to contract and have these tests. I think it will really help us to have a clearer picture on where we are as a school district. I have a couple of questions. Is the MAP test able to identify gaps in learning? Even though a student may show they're on grade level, a lot of times there's gaps, particularly in math. Will it show those gaps and how to address them?
Absolutely. So in that student level report that goes to parents, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Seals, but as well as the information that teachers get on every student in their class, it will break down that student's information by skill level, by both strengths and areas and opportunities for improvement and growth. And so that really is the information that the teachers use then, like I said, whether a student is below, at, or above grade level, to continue to support and accelerate their learning.
That's good to know, especially as we've gone through the last couple of years. I know we should see for certain many gaps in our students' learning, and I think that will help us and guide us. My other question is, with the pre-ACT, are we going to have a better picture of where our ninth graders are? I know we have some issues in ninth grade where kids are having a difficult time engaging, and we're losing students at this time. And I anticipate we will be able to see where they are and maybe be able to grab them and keep them engaged.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When you think about the gap with the state assessment, right? Students are tested in grades 3 through 8, and then they're not tested again till grade 11. So that was a particular gap that we've had, is with our high school students, particularly our incoming freshman class. And so yes, the pre-ACT will give us that good information and indicator as to where those students are progressing, so that those teachers can also intervene.
Is the pre-ACT administered more than once per year, or is it just administered once?
You know, I'm going to have to ask Director Seals if she can please respond to that. She was the one that worked with principals to set those testing windows and timelines.
Valerie, can you answer that question, please?
Yes.
Valerie, go ahead.
Well, I want to say two things, if you can hear me okay. In regards to the last question, one of the benefits, and Jim, I'm happy to put together a packet for the board on exactly how the MAP assessments work. SBAC only tests at grade level regardless. So a fourth grade student is always only testing on fourth grade standards, even if they're operating at second grade standards or sixth grade standards. There is only fourth grade questions asked of a fourth grade student. Whereas MAP testing, when you sit down a fourth grade student to begin their testing, they will start with fourth grade level questions, but the test quickly accommodates to how the students respond. So if they, answer 3 fourth grade math questions in a row correctly, that test is going to ramp up, and it might grab some 5th grade standards, and it might grab some 6th grade standards until it finds that zone of proximal development that's perfect for that student. And so to answer Amy's question, that's how MAP does in regards to identifying gaps. You may have really strong algebraic scores, but very low numeracy scores, for example. And so that student report will show that. As far as ACT, we're very excited to bring that on. Its predictive capability of showing what a student will score on the ACT in that 11th grade year is extremely high. In fact, I'm looking at the research right now, that composite score, it's a 0.91 predictive rate or correlation to what their ACT score will be. And that allows students and families to start planning for college, start planning for careers, start making considerations of AP courses potentially, or some remediation that needs to be done to score higher the next go-round and the go-round after that. So we're very excited that in 2019, the pre-ACT was directed for 8th and 9th grade. We are only offering it for 9th grade because we have MAP in 8th. Assessments have been completed. We should have scores within 2 weeks.
Will you ask her if is it only administered once a year?
Valerie, the question is pre-ACT only administered once a year?
Twice. Okay. So we've done our fall administration. We will do our spring administration in, I want to say April. The actual ACT is March 8th.
Okay, very good. And I just have one additional question.
I'm sorry, I somehow muted the YouTube, so I don't know what you guys are saying. I apologize.
I'll repeat the question if it's not something I can answer, Valerie.
So I think in our district we do see a number of students, as you expressed, come to us at below their developmental age. So when they enter kindergarten, they may not have ever been introduced to letters or the sounds of letters. And so they're behind their peers. So if we're looking at students that are a grade or 2 grades below, at what point should we expect them to be caught up to be able to obtain successful high school graduation?
You know what? It really depends, Amy, on how far below grade level that they are. And when you think about students that are developmentally behind, sometimes it's not only academically either. Sometimes it could be physically, social, emotionally, just in terms of their social skills and their ability to regulate and self-regulate. And so some of our students really come to us not only very behind academically, but behind in other areas of normal childhood development as well, all important in the school environment. But in terms of your question, when you think about students that start school, whether we get them as kindergartners or second graders or as 8th graders, whatever age they are, if they are that far behind, obviously the older they are, we need to see much more progress in a year's worth of time. And that's why it is so very important that we have the most excellent teacher in front of those kids every day. Because those kids will never bridge the gap if they're only making a year's worth of progress in a year's amount of time. And so there's no cut and dry response to this, but really depends on where that kid is at when they come to us, what other supports they need, and then it's imperative that they make more than a year's worth of growth in a year's amount of time to begin bridging that achievement gap.
Brianna.
Sorry. Okay, I was just wondering about the turnaround time for the results of all of these tests. I think Mrs. Seals said something about the pre-ACT being 2 weeks. So if we're doing Acadience reading and math testing, that's for targeted instruction, correct? So
Yep.
What is the turnaround time on results for that so teachers can make a game plan with their students?
Yep. Are you talking about turnaround results time for the board or teachers?
For the teacher themselves.
Yeah,
and the student
teachers, I believe, see those results fairly quickly, especially, I believe, with the map. And again, I'm going to ask Director Seals. The question from Brianna was, how quickly do teachers see this assessment data once the assessment has been completed?
From Brianna was, how quickly do teachers see this assessment data once the assessment has been completed?
Acadience is immediate. MAP is within 24 hours. Because the pre-ACT and ACT are being administered paper pencil, it's a couple weeks from when we ship those test booklets off. And then ACT, I mean, we've always received our ACT results for students that elected to test. We always receive them on a CD a couple weeks after the testing event. They've assured us that's what will happen with pre-ACT too. Because the pre-ACT and are being administered cancel in a couple weeks from when we
Is that the YouTube?
Yeah.
So it's picking up what she's saying, okay. Is that it, Brianna? All right. I don't see any other names up, so I do have a question too. Does MAPS have the foundational measures that Acadience does? And what I mean by that is Acadience was, sold to us as our universal screener in including catching those gaps. It's foundational, it's well tested, it can even catch those kids that have dyslexia. Is that what we use first? Because if it's got the foundational measures, I would assume that that's what we would use first before we would use any other assessment.
Yeah.
So
That's a great question, Kate, and let me walk you through that. And certainly if Director Seals has anything further to add, she can jump in. So we are not going to cease using Acadience. You are right. It has a very specific purpose. It's very diagnostic in nature, and it is a universal screener to catch those reading deficiencies really early so that we can intervene. Whether a student is indicating signs of dyslexia or other reading disorders. So we're going to continue Acadience for reading K through 5, like we have the last couple of years. We're adding Acadience Math for K through 2, and then we're going to be using MAP for both reading and math 3 through 8. And MAP gives us some different information, and particularly for teachers as they're thinking about their guided math groups, their guided reading groups, etc., really helps them to put together those guided groups to really target instruction based on what that group of students who's showing similar gaps based on the MAP data that they get broken down by skill level, where Acadience is much more tailored to individual students and helping to monitor their progress and intervene. I hope that answers your question.
Well, kind of, because the Acadience is foundational and measures, I would assume we would use that still through 3 through 5 first to catch those gaps, and then use the MAPs that for whatever that catches afterwards.
Yes, and we do plan to use both because we will learn different data, as I said, with MAP, but yes, that Acadience data is absolutely instrumental for diagnosing those important reading deficiencies so that teachers know what to do down to that individual student level. And I don't know, Director Seals or even Dr. Hafer, if either of you want to share anything more on Acadience specifically as it relates to being that universal screener to progress monitor and to identify students with dyslexia or other reading deficiencies.
But just to clarify in your answers, or if you have something to say, I want to know that the district is using Acadience as its go-to first and foremost, and then using those other pieces, because that is, like you said, foundational and what catches things first. So that's used first before anything else. That's my question.
Like that, and then I
talk.
Okay. Do you want to let Valerie talk first?
Valerie, go ahead and talk.
President Thomas, we are using Acadience as our universal screener. It is the first assessment that all of our students take, K through 5 for reading. That data is reviewed with our data teams, and when groups are set up based on that data, you are correct that Acadience is more skills-based, MAP is more standards-based, and we will use both grades 3 through 5. For the record, MAP only goes down to 2nd grade.
Okay, I just want to make sure the focus is with Acadience. All right, thank you. Any other questions on this? All right, go ahead and move on to the superintendent report, please, Dr. Simon.
Thank you, President Thomas. It has been a very busy couple of weeks since our last school board meeting, so I'm just going to share a few highlights. On September 8th, we held our first Indigenous Education Task Force meeting, followed by a study session on Title VI Indian education last Tuesday night. The goal of the task force is to bring recommendations for the improvement of Indian education programming to the board and me for consideration later this fall. At the end of last Thursday afternoon, I joined the Central Drumline and Stevens cheerleaders at Monument Health to thank and cheer on healthcare workers. That night was my first Student Voice Forum meeting with high school students. There was a lot of interest and discussion around the proposed changes to the social studies standards, particularly related to the reduction of the Oceti-Sakowee essential understandings. There was strong consensus among the students that these are important for all students to learn about. I also shared with them our intent in changing the policies related to student board representation, that really it is about trying to strengthen that role and make that role of student reps more meaningful, including the selection of students and what that looks like. They were excited to hear this and would like to bring some ideas and feedback to our next Student Voice Forum meeting, and I assured them that I would bring then that feedback to the board for consideration. Next, I'd like to just show you the updated COVID testing information. We are seeing some reductions in our active cases, and so as you look at the screen here at the last board meeting, which was 13 days in, we were at about 320 cases, if I'm calling correctly, compared to the same point in time last school year. It hovered right around 50. As we look at where the data is at this week, or rather this board meeting, we can see now that we have reduced to about 220-ish. And again, this is actually last Friday's data, and so it actually has come down to about 200 the last time I checked. And again, this is just another view with the graphs. But again, at our last board meeting is where we were over 300, and now we're at about 200. While our active case numbers are declining, we have yet to see the need for subs, however, decline. We continue to have teacher sub-fill rates ranging from 45 to 55 and occasionally 60% fill rate on a day-to-day basis. And then when we look at our overall sub-fill rates for any kinds of positions, that percentage is ranging from 40 to 50% filled. As you can imagine, at the school level environment, as teachers and others described tonight, it really is an all hands on deck approach to cover these positions. At our last meeting, we discussed expanding our district dashboard to include reporting of COVID cases school by school. We do expect that new dashboard to be up and running sometime tomorrow. And next to that dashboard, there will be a link so that parents can click on that link if they do want to opt into receiving those daily case notifications. And so I would just let everyone know to look for information to come from Katie Urban. Should be coming hopefully tomorrow, announcing that that dashboard is ready. Finally, we received the exciting news this morning from the U.S. Department of Education that Pinedale has been named a National Blue Ribbon School, one of 4 in South Dakota. Congratulations to the staff and leadership at Pinedale on this tremendous achievement. We look forward to recognizing Principal Frankie and his staff at a board meeting soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. All right, moving on to see if there's any members that have any reports. I'm not seeing any hands up or names, and we can move on to other. I have not been handed in any conflicts of interest, So moving on to item 7 for board action. I need a motion and a second to approve of A, the South Dakota Beef Industry Council.
So moved.
Second.
Jim and Gabe, any discussion on this one? Go ahead, Amy.
I do have to say that I've been impressed with the information that has come from this grant, as I have a student athlete that is playing this fall. So it's been helpful, particularly on the nutrition information, accurate and on spot and easy to understand.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Deb.
Can we take into consideration the gal that talked about this, maybe trying to get somebody local for the nutrition instead of going with Sanford?
That could probably be talked about later on. It'd have to be something that somebody else is actually offering to even accept a grant. They'd have to be offering it.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Director Talley knows offhand the answer to that question.
It would be nice if we could use somebody local.
I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I do know the beef grant as it stands now and as they accepted it is through Sanford. But it would be nice, obviously, as a community to take part in that. I'm not sure if that's going to be students and their advisors getting out and talking with local businesses.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. 7B, addendum back to school plan revision. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Jim and Amy, any discussion? Go ahead, Amy.
Can we have an explanation on the changes and why they're coming?
I think I will defer to Dr. Hafer on the back-to-school plan. It was some language that the ESSER fund needed to have. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I know how to. No, okay, I'm not, I swear I'm not. Thank you, I needed some help. This was part of the grant that we just needed to add in more information about what we were doing for our special needs students. That was a part of it. And it's required by law just to make sure that our families know that we're following what's in our back-to-school plan. There wasn't any verbiage in the plan for that.
Yeah, and as I read through it, it does say something about, kids that are on IEPs and et cetera will always have the chance to be revisited. Yes. And it really isn't anything different than we're already doing. I know that as a daughter who has an IEP as well, anytime we need to revisit that and the parents want a meeting, it's done. Yes. So, and I've always been treated very well, so is my daughter, in making sure it's been happening.
Yeah, it just wasn't in there, so we had to add it in. Yep, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on that, Amy? No. All right. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to item 8, reading of policies for the third and final reading. We will take these each separately. So do I have a motion and a second for A, emergency closing of schools?
So moved.
Brianna seconds. All right, do we have any discussion?
Can you just review the main changes that are being made to this policy, Kate?
It was just an added sentence on the first page that the policy does not apply to the closure of schools due to a pandemic, and it will require a separate policy approved by the Board of Education. And on the second page, under activities, there was just some clarifying language to have the activities directors, principals making recommendations to the superintendent or the designee of the superintendent that such, contests or situations that might be canceled. And then also, I believe we didn't have the community relations manager in there, so that was added as someone to contact as well. And then under definitions, pandemic was redefined, and reporting procedures, just saying that it would be all of the closures, postponements, cancellations would be reported to the district communication platform.
So at one point, we had discussed removing the word health, but that is staying in the policy.
Actually, that's no. The actual language that for the first one was to strike out health on 2 sections.
Which 2 sections has it been
A,
stricken from?
Where it says health in A, and where it says health in number 3A.
So that's not currently reflected in this policy.
Should have been.
And I think it's accurate to have the word health left in here because there are a number of statutes that discuss health for students within a school system. And also the state's recommendations for a back-to-school plan include that we do have a responsibility for taking care of children's physical, social, emotional, and mental health as far as they play into their growth and development.
And that is still something that they do, obviously, but in this policy, there is no statute that actually says that health has to be in there, and we cannot be responsible for the health of the child depending on how they came into the classroom or into the school building. The safety of the students, I believe, includes that, and if you could cite the statute that it needs to have it, that would be nice. But as far as having the strike or the right version up here, that was supposed to be Monday morning, was supposed to have that, and I'm not sure if Shirley ended up getting that communication. Because the original language did have that, and we had to go back to this. Go ahead, Dr. Simon.
Yes, if I may clarify, the original language just had what's redlined here currently. And so my understanding was that if the health was going to be struck, that there would be an amendment made tonight.
That was not my understanding. Because the original language that I brought was with health stricken out. And there was no amendment at any other board meeting that took it out. So I guess I would make, Jim, go ahead.
So after reading this multiple times through the last couple of weeks, the reason why health was there was because of C in the pandemic, and we have outlined the pandemic. I personally don't see an issue with threatening the health in A, simply because we have C and the board is in charge of closing schools. After the 3rd day, we can have a meeting and we can decide whether we want the school closed or not. And I don't see the school being closed for health unless it's like black mold and it's to the health and or safety. We can mince words down this road, but I personally don't see an issue with health simply because we have C in there that gives us the power. Thank you.
Amy?
It's South Dakota Codified Law 13-33A1 states a public school system shall provide school health services coordinated by a registered nurse. So I would agree with Jim. I think we've indicated our desire to not have schools closed because of the current pandemic. in the amendment under C. But if there is a situation where we are not able to provide health services, as we were unable to last year when schools closed, as all of our nursing staff was out, that we could act in compliance with state statute.
Say that statute again, please.
Thirteen 33 A1.
A1, there isn't any letters associated with the codified law.
And it's just 13-33.
Amy, with all due respect, there are 30.
13, section 13-33.
And then there's 1 through 30 after that.
It is just an example that the school system is interested and tasked to provide a healthy environment and to consider the health of students as a necessary ingredient in student learning and success.
Okay. You know, I don't really have a problem either with the health, Amy, but if you're going to cite statute, you need to be specific. And that does not say that health is in there at all. That would have to be in our policy. So we have a motion and a second, as is. Health is not stricken, with the C added language for the closure of schools during a pandemic, and the other explanation I already gave on the backside. All those in favor say aye.
Oh, I have another comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I had motioned at the previous 2 meetings that be changed, as I have read through our other policies, I think there are many other avenues to be concerned about safety, to be concerned about the health of students. There are many policies that would state currently we should be considering closing our schools because they aren't safe, our inability to staff and to bring on substitutes being the prime example. I have no desire to close schools, so I hope the other measures that we are taking in this meeting will help us to solve that issue. But I do see that the superintendent, whoever they may be, does have the authority to work within policy to keep students safe and staff safe. So I will not be making an amendment to this policy, but I will not approve it as is.
Brianna?
Never mind. Never.
Okay.
I can't cancel.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in opposing? All right. Measure passes. Okay, moving on to 8B, student representative protocol, to be taken out as one reading only. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Jim and Deb. All right, any discussion? Go ahead, Jim.
Just for clarification, this is just to clean up the language. We are going to bring it back so that we do have student reps, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, passes. 8C, BBB school board elections. Motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Jim and Brianna was first. Again, this is clarifying that we are going to bring back in the student handbook protocol for the student representatives. They will still go on this year as they have been in the past. but this removes their position from school board elections policy. Any other discussion? Amy?
So, I think the changes that have been discussed regarding student representative protocol are, they seem very exciting. They seem to enrich this responsibility. And so I hope that we do what we've said we would do, but it will be up to the students to make sure that it happens. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, 8D, news media service at board meetings.
So moved.
Second.
That was Jim and Brianna. Any discussion? Amy?
I'll let Dr. Simon speak first because she may answer my question.
Go ahead and.
Thank you, President Thomas. So yes, I did follow up and get legal counsel's perspective on this policy, particularly as it relates to the mandatory requirement for the media to wear their credentials. We cannot, as a school board, exclude members of the public, including the press, from special or regular school board meetings. And there's an implication that if they need to show credentials, that perhaps there's a First Amendment or open meeting law violation. And so legal counsel's recommendation was that instead it's say news media are asked to display their credentials during their participation in any public board meeting.
Does somebody want to make that amendment?
I will.
Second it.
As Dr. Simon stated.
Second.
Jim seconded that. Shirley, do you have that language then?
I can give it to her in writing.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, with a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? 8E, preliminary development of policies.
Do we need to approve the policy? We just approved the amendment to the policy.
Oh, you're right. Forgive me. Back to the first and second motion to approve of it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, now passes. Thank you, Amy. All right, moving on to E, preliminary development of policies. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Brianna seconded. Any discussion? Amy?
I think this is a significant policy. As we've eliminated our other governance policies, I think it would be good to make this policy more clear on our process of bringing policies forward. Do we have a committee? Is it being vetted through legal counsel before it arrives to the dais? And so I would make a motion that we send this policy to an actual study group where we can talk about our process in policy development and maybe add a little bit more of that process to this policy.
Does she have a second? Dies for a lack of second. We have a motion and a second to approve of the development of policies as is. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All right. 8F, suspension of policies. Do I have a motion and second?
Second.
Gabe and then Jim. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And 8G, media relations. Motion and second, please.
So moved.
Jim and Deb. All right, discussion. Dr. Simon.
This is another policy that legal counsel did weigh in on, and their feedback was that these changes that are in the policy shouldn't be done without changing the job descriptions of the superintendent and the community relations manager, because this language is very consistent in what is in that community relations manager's job description. Further, in order to do that, that also involves other HR implications that would need to be discussed. So legal counsel's advice was until such time that you have vetted changing those job descriptions and any potential ramifications, that their advice would be not to make these changes to this policy.
So they're saying don't change the job, just leave it as public information manager even though we don't have one?
So public information manager, community relations manager, you know, it's one of those titles that I would argue is somewhat interchangeable. If we truly were going to update this policy, I would say in conjunction with the community relations manager, and leave that language and subsequently where it is struck out in until such time legal counsel has discussion with the board about changing those descriptions, job descriptions, and then changing the policy.
Go ahead, Jim.
Due to this information that we just received, I would like to see if we can pull this so that we can bring it back after we have a conversation with the attorney.
Before you make that motion, somebody could just amend it to add these parts that are stricken out back in.
Okay. I'll second Amy's motion.
Okay. All right.
Madam President, you're adding, or on striking, but you're also going to allow public information manager to be changed to community relations manager, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that your? Is that your motion?
I think that is the advice from legal counsel, is to keep it consistent with what our job descriptions state.
Then I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Brianna, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have a clarification question. Dr. Simon, when did legal counsel get back with you on this?
They got back to us yesterday, and I sent it out to board leadership at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Deb, go ahead.
So how do I defer the motion? I can do a substitute motion to defer it until we can talk about it.
I mean, you could. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was talking to her.
So the lawyers got back to us. Jim made a motion, or Amy made a motion to go ahead and put their advice back in, which is to take the public information manager and leave it as that, because that is a description of the job. And you could make a substitute amendment. Our motion to
defer it.
To put it on another one, but for discussion. But that was what Jim wanted to do. So you could do that. You could make a motion.
I think we're confused, and I think we should defer it.
All right. So your motion is to put it on to the next.
Yes.
meeting. Does she have a second?
I second that.
Brianna seconds. All right. Any other discussion?
I think just point of order, because now there are two motions on the floor.
So this one we're doing for her motion to put it on to the next meeting for better clarification from legal advice. So, all those in favor of that motion?
You have to do the first one.
She got a second one.
So we're doing Deb's motion.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Nay.
All right, so roll call. Thank you, Shirley.
Kate?
Aye.
Gabe?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Deb?
Yes.
Brianna?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
All right, because that motion passed and it's going to the next meeting, the other two do not need to be revisited. All right, approval of consent.
So moved.
Jim
Second.
and Deb seconded. Does anybody want anything pulled?
Madam President.
Yes.
If we could pull item C, budget amendment for explanation.
Okay. So approving of A through P with the exception of C being pulled.
I think we should pull P, or at least clarify that it's on there.
That's a good idea too. All right, so A through O with the exception of C and P. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. All right, on to C. I do need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Jim and Deb. All right, can we get some explanation for the public on this one? Coy.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely be happy to provide that. So I think it'd be best if I just work down and addressed each of those items individually, board. So starting with one, as we've discussed, because the end and beginning of the fiscal year falls right in the middle of the summer, we often have capital outlay projects that were approved in the previous fiscal year that are not fully completed and therefore must be carried over into the next fiscal year. And that's what these amendments are in number one. So these are projects that were presented to the board and approved in the fiscal year 21 budget. At the end of the year, my office works with the facilities department in determining which of those projects are not completed and need to be carried into the next fiscal year for completion. Because they're carryover projects, we then do a budget amendment to increase the current year budget, so the fiscal year budget that we are currently in, to accommodate for those additional expenses. So they're not additions to the budget that require new money. It's carrying over projects that capital outlay funds had already been earmarked for into the next fiscal year. So they were not expensed in the previous fiscal year. So the funds are still sitting there waiting to be expensed. I attached the detailed breakdown of those projects. You can kind of see the different projects in different states. There were some architectural and engineering fees left on some of the projects, and then also included the construction fee balances left to be paid. So the totals of those two, between the architectural and engineering costs and the construction costs, were the total amount for that overall amendment. And I'll stop there very quickly, Mr. President, and see if there are any questions on that item.
Any board members have any questions about that?
Okay. Item number 2, that amendment was for library furniture and equipment purchases that were, again, ordered in the last fiscal year, approved in the previous fiscal year budget, ordered in that fiscal year, but because of product availability and some timeline issues, were not received in time to be expensed. So again, move them forward as a budget amendment. Funds were earmarked but not expended in the previous fiscal year, so we'll move those forward and those will be expended as well. Those are, there was another item that I thought might be a little confusing, given that they were labeled instruction. The functional codes are labeled as instruction. But because they are actually equipment purchases, things like scanners, shelving units, other actual equipment or furniture expenses, they're actually under capital outlay. So again, we're approved under the capital outlay budget last year.
So we're basically just clarifying that that's not curriculum that is being bought with capital outlay.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is what I did need to have clarification on. And I
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Any questions from the board on that one? Okay.
Okay, and then number 3, this is the amendment to add the emergency lighting project to the budget, fiscal year 22 budget, current fiscal year budget, that the board approved on July 26th. So the final budget was approved prior to this project coming to our attention, and prior to the board having prior to the board's approval. So we weren't able to account for that project in that budget. So we're simply now adding the funds to accommodate for those expenses for that project.
So on each one of these, 1, 2, and 3, right before it, it says increase/decrease. If it's in black, I'm assuming increase.
Yes, ma'am.
Red would be decrease. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
Any other questions from board? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, board. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion and a second to approve of it. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right. And on to P, the addendum, Rapid City Area School substitute pay. I believe I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Jim and Amy. And Coy, could you speak to that as well? Maybe Kristen?
Sure, absolutely. I will defer to Director Strissel first, and then I can add anything I have as well.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this substitute pay proposal is to, again, as mentioned in public comment and by our staff, acknowledge that we are experiencing a staffing shortfall, which creates unfilled positions, and not only creates those unfilled positions, but creates an even greater demand within our substitute group. What you will see in the substitute pay proposal is that in addition to that, we have a few key components that make substitute staffing even more challenging at this time than you would see in a typical year. As I mentioned, those unfilled positions that we have, as of last week, we had 26.5 teacher positions that are unfilled. That's obviously a very significant student impact. Paraprofessionals, 21 positions unfilled. Student nutrition, just about 14 positions unfilled. Buildings and grounds, 17. And student transportation, 2 positions unfilled. And each one of those categories are positions that we do provide substitute coverage for based on the essential services that they do in supporting students. We have seen the South Dakota Department of Education changing its interpretation of some of its guidance in the last year, and that has, that clarity that they've provided in how they're administering those codified laws and those requirements and regulations causes it to become more difficult to provide substitute coverage, because in more instances we are finding that rather than accepting for example, a bachelor, someone who has a bachelor's degree, they are requiring someone to substitute who is a certified teacher. And for those folks, we want to recruit them. If you know anybody, please send them our way. But that provides a bit of a challenge, particularly in staffing those long-term positions that you might see for maternity and paternity leave. Additionally, smaller substitute group size. Generally speaking, our substitute group ranges around 250 to 400, depending on the time of year. You see a lot of fluctuation. Right now, we are at 163 individuals, and keeping in mind that that substitute pool is, by its design, a very nebulous staffing group. Those are people who are looking for a more flexible schedule, that type of thing. And so you can't really say if you have 100 absences, 163 staff are going to be able to fill that. Additionally, we have a lower fill rate and increased absences due to COVID-19. And so that is creating, in this environment where we have less staff in the pool, much greater demand. And so those four pieces have really caused us to come to the unsurprising reality that we need to take some action with the substitute group and pay. So the administrative consideration that you have in front of you is to say, we would like to increase sub pay as a way to provide some greater attraction to recruit people into that substitute group and hopefully provide some alleviation for our really dedicated staff who are in all capacities going in and pinch hitting and doing the very best that they can. We carefully thought out what these rates of pay would be. And if we can say, hey, we are going to make these increases effective on the October 1st date, which would be a payroll transition date, through the end of the year or such time that the board wishes to reconsider, we could get this implemented for you very quickly. Any questions that you might have or anything that I missed?
I don't think so. I really appreciate that explanation, and I'm really glad that we could all come together and find some sort of, at least something of a plan. Did you have anything to add? No?
Madam President, just very quickly from the financial perspective, I would add, in looking at this proposal, we went back and tried to analyze several years of the budget utilization for the budget that we set aside for substitutes in those individual categories that Director Strissel spoke about. It's really difficult to accurately predict the budget for those areas because there are a lot of variables and factors that can impact that whole situation and how much of the budget you actually utilize. So as we discussed that, we felt comfortable bringing this to the board for approval, and we believe that we'll have budget that we will be able to absorb a good deal of the additional expense. We'll monitor that throughout the year. We'll keep the board updated, and if we think that that situation is changing, of course, we'll bring that to the board's attention with some recommendations for how we deal with that at that point in time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, with no further other discussion on that, we have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, we are moving into executive session. There will be no official business afterwards for SDCL 125-2-1 and for CDCL 1-25-2.3. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
So moved.